Hello friends, greetings of the day. Welcome to the online session of Business Economics. Friends, you know that in this series we are learning chapter number 3, that is theory of production and cost. You know that this chapter is divided into two parts. Unit number 1 is about theory of production and unit number 2 is about theory of cost. In that, currently we are learning unit number 1, that is theory of production. In first part of this video, we had already covered the meaning of production and the various types of utility that is useful for creating the production. Now in this unit, theory of production, we are going to start with another topic, that is factors of production. Friends, you know that in order to produce anything, whether it is a good or a service, we require factors of production. There are 4 different factors of production. First one is land, next is labor, then capital, and fourth one is entrepreneurship. Friends, without these 4 factors of production can never be possible. We need to utilize all of them in certain proportion. So let us learn them in detail. Now this is very much important topic you need to remember, because there are so many MCQs that can be asked out of the topic factors of production. Let us start with the first one, that is land. Friends, in general we consider that land means the soil or the upper surface of the earth. But economics does not believe this. According to economics, land does not mean only soil or earth's surface alone, but it refers to all the free gifts of nature, which would include, besides the land, the natural resources, water, air, lighting, heating, mines, and fertility of soil. All these are free gifts from nature, so all of them will be considered as land according to economics. Now let us learn the characteristics of land. The first one, as you know, it is free gift of nature. We do not have to make any payment in order to utilize the land. It is freely given, it is freely available to everyone. Second is supply of land is fixed. The supply of land is fixed and it cannot be extended. Friends, here we have to understand two viewpoints. If we consider the micro viewpoint, that is from the viewpoint of an individual, the supply of land can be extended. Say for example, you have a land for 5 yards or 7 yards, but it is not enough for you. You can extend it. You can purchase another 10 yards or 15 yards nearby. So the supply of land can be increased if we are talking from the individual viewpoint. But if we are talking from the macro viewpoint, that means the land available for the whole nation or the land available for the whole world, in that case the supply of land is perfectly inelastic. Do remember friends, the supply of land is perfectly inelastic from the macro angle. Then land is permanent and has indestructible powers. It means that land cannot be destroyed. However, the quality of land can be increased or decreased. We can utilize fertilizer, and with the use of fertilizer the fertility of land can be increased. But it is not possible that we are completely destroying the land. So complete destruction of land is not possible. Friends, this concept was given by David Ricardo. So you need to remember the name of David Ricardo, that land has indestructible powers. This was given by David Ricardo. And then land is a passive factor of production. Now when it is passive factor of production, it means that it cannot produce itself. Human efforts are required in order to make the production out of land. It cannot produce itself. That is why it is known as passive factor of production. Then comes land is immobile. Immobile means not transferable. Land cannot be transferred from one place to another place. It remains where it is situated, where it is located. We cannot transfer it from one place to another place. That is why land is immobile. Then land has multiple uses. Land has multiple uses. It means that same piece of land can be utilized for several purposes. Say for example, it can be utilized for farming, it can be utilized for construction of a building, or it can be utilized for some other purposes. So a piece of land has multiple uses. Then land has heterogeneous quality. That means every land or every piece of land does not have equal quality. It is heterogeneous. Some land are fertile, whereas others are barren lands. So the quality of land are different. That is called heterogeneous land. So these all were the factors or characteristics of land. Now the next factor of production is labor. Friends, we generally believe that labor means the physical efforts. But in economics, labor does not mean only the physical efforts. Labor is physical or mental efforts of human beings towards the production of goods and services. Friends, the efforts can be either physical or mental, whatever be the kind of efforts, but that should be made in order to produce either the good or the services. The efforts which are made for production of goods or services, whether they are physical efforts or mental efforts, they will be considered as a labor according to economics. Now let us learn the characteristics of labor. The first one is it is human effort. Friends, do remember two things, labor and laborer. Labor is the effort made by laborer. So laborer is a person, whereas labor is the effort. So two things are separate. Labor is the effort, whereas laborer is the person. So labor is the human effort made by laborer. Then labor is perishable. Labor cannot be saved, it cannot be protected, it cannot be reserved, it will be perished. If you want to utilize labor, it must be utilized right now. The labor of this second can be utilized at this second only. It cannot be saved or it cannot be reserved for the next second. It cannot be reserved for tomorrow. Today's labor will be perished when the day is over. Today's labor cannot be carried forward tomorrow. So labor is perishable. Then labor is an active factor of production. Friends, in the land we had understood that land was passive factor of production. It means that it cannot produce itself. But labor is active factor of production. It means that it produces or it makes efforts, and that is why production happens. Then labor is inseparable from laborer. As I said, laborer is a person, whereas labor is the effort made by that person. So where laborer is, labor can be there only. Labor and laborer, they cannot be separated out. We cannot separate labor from this laborer. Where laborer is existing, labor exists there only. And then labor power differs from laborer to laborer. The capacity of every laborer will be different. Some laborer will be very much efficient, they can work for 12-15 hours, whereas some laborers will be there who are having low capacity, they may work for 5 to 6 hours only. So the capacity of labor are different from laborer to laborer. And then all labor may not be productive. Friends, remember, only that labor will be productive which creates economic reward. If labor is there but it does not create economic reward, it will not be considered as labor under economics. If no economic reward is generated by your efforts, it will not be considered as labor. Then labor has poor bargaining power. Friends, this is the characteristic of olden days. In ancient time, in olden days, the laborers were not united, they did not have unity, and as a result, they were exploited by the owners of the factory. They did not have the capacity to argue, they did not have the capacity to bargain for their benefits. So that was the characteristic of olden days. But nowadays, in modern times, the laborers are united and they cannot be exploited by the factory owners. They have the bargaining power now. Next, labor is mobile. It means that labor is transferable from one place to another place. It can go from one place to another place in order to find out labor. So it is considered as mobile. But here, friends, you have to remember one thing. Labor is mobile, but it is not perfectly mobile. There is imperfect mobility of labor. It means that labor cannot go anywhere in the world. It will rather select remaining there where work is available. So the transferability is there, but it is not completely transferable. That is why it is known as immobility or imperfect mobility of labor. Now there is no rapid adjustment of supply of labor to the demand for it. The supply of labor and the demand for labor, they cannot be rapidly adjusted. When the demand of labor arises, the supply of labor does not increase in equal proportion, and that is why there is created shortage of labor. And when there is a shortage of labor, the prices of labor will increase, and that will create benefit to the laborers. So there is no rapid adjustment. The rate at which the demand of labor increases, the supply of labor does not increase at the same rate. So there is created a shortage, and as a result of this shortage, the wage rates of laborer will increase. Now laborer have to make the choice between hours of labor and hours of leisure. Friends, hours of labor and hours of leisure. We all like to have leisure, but this leisure cannot run for long run. Ultimately, someday we have to select the labor. So the laborers will have to select labor in the long run, but in the short run they prefer leisures, they prefer enjoyment, they prefer the rest, and as a result in the short run the supply of labor will be less because laborer prefers leisure, but in the long run leisure will not do and the person will be compelled to select labor. So in the long run supply of labor will be increased, but in the short run supply of labor is less because in the short run people like to have leisure. Now another important point that you need to remember is supply curve of labor. The question or MCQ can be asked here, what is the supply curve of labor? So the supply curve of labor is known as backward bending supply curve. Let us prepare backward bending supply curve. Friends, this is x-axis, this is y-axis. On x-axis we have presented the labor hours or hours of labor, and on the y-axis we have presented wages. As you can see that initially as the wage rate increases, in that manner, as the wage rate increases, the supply of labor goes on increasing at a particular level. Up to this point, the supply of labor, the hours of labor has increased. But after that point, even if the wage rate increases, the supply of labor will not straightly go on increasing, but rather it will backward bend, or we can say it will start falling, it will start decreasing. So that curve which is prepared here, this is known as backward bending supply curve. So supply curve of labor is backward bending supply curve. Next factor of production is capital. Now capital, in ordinary term we believe that capital is money, but in economics capital is not money. Let us understand the meaning of capital in economics. Capital is man-made material source of production. Capital is what? It is man-made material source of production. It means that whatever is created by the man in order to produce further, that is considered as capital. So for example, man has created a machine, so that machine is useful for the production, so that machine will be considered as a capital. Capital consists that part of production which is used for further production. Do remember this, capital is that part of production which is useful for further production. It means that capital itself is a production. As I gave you the example, see, if a man has created a machine, so the machine, creation of machine is itself a production. Now that machine will be utilized for further production. So for example, the man has created a power loom. Power loom is utilized for manufacturing textile. So creation of power loom is itself a production. But after that power loom is created, that is further utilized to produce textile. So the production of capital is useful for further production. Now it is a stock concept. Friends, you know two kind of concepts, stock concept and flow concept. When any data is presented on a point of time, it is known as stock concept. So capital is a stock concept. But when any data is presented on a period of time, it is known as a flow concept. We have already given the example of flow concept, that is demand and supply are flow concept. Capital is a stock concept. Then it is a produced factor of production. Now before learning capital, we have learnt two different factors, that was land and labor. Land and labor were the original factor of production. That means they were given by the nature, but capital is not given by the nature. Capital is produced by man. That is why it is known as produced factor of production. And it is part of wealth, but all wealth is not capital. Capital is a part of wealth, but all wealth is not capital. Why? Because only that wealth is capital which is useful for production purpose. The wealth which is not useful for production purpose is wealth but not capital. Only that wealth which is useful for production is considered as capital. Now let us learn the classification of capital. Different viewpoints are given here for the classification of capital. The first is real capital and human capital. Now what do we include in real capital? So buildings, plants, machinery, all these things, they are considered as real capital because they all can be seen and touched. Next is human capital. Human capital means the human skills and ability, which is in the benefit of any organization. So for any organization, the human skills and ability is considered as human capital for that organization. Next comes individual capital and social capital. Now individual capital means the capital which is personally owned, the things on which one person can establish the ownership will be considered as individual capital. Now you can say that this is my house, this is my room. So my house and my room, that means it means that you have created your personal ownership, and when it is personal owned, it is known as individual capital. Next is social capital. Now social capital means wholly owned things like bridges and canals and roads. All these are not owned by one individual, but they are wholly owned by the whole society. So that is known as social capital. Then comes fixed capital and circulating capital. Fixed capital means once the investment is made, it cannot be easily converted into cash. So the investment made in the buildings, plants and machinery, they cannot be easily converted into cash. That's why they are considered as fixed capital. But circulating capital on the other hand is the investment made in the capital which can be easily converted into cash, like stocks, debtors, bills receivables. They are easily convertible into cash. We can sell them and get cash out of them. So that is considered as circulating capital. And next comes tangible capital and intangible capital. Now tangible capital is building, plants and machinery which can be seen and touched are considered as tangible, but the things which cannot be seen and touched are considered as intangible capital. So for example, goodwill, patents, trademarks, copyrights, all these exist in the business but they cannot be seen and touched. That is why they are known as intangible capital. So these all are the types of capital according to different viewpoints. Now let us learn capital formation. What do we mean by capital formation? So capital formation means sustained increase in the stock of real capital in a country. When there is continuous or persistent increase in the stock of real capital, we can say that the capital formation is taking place. In other words, capital formation involves production of more capital goods like machines, tools, factories, transportation equipments, electricity, which all are useful for further production or future production. In all sense, these are considered as capital formation. Now it is considered as an investment which must be productive investment. So the productive investment is also considered as capital formation. Now the stages of capital formation, how capital formation takes place. Let us understand. The first stage of capital formation is real savings. Real savings is Y minus C. Y is yield minus C means consumption. Now yield minus consumption, whatever remains is considered as real savings. But this real saving depends on two factors. One is willingness to save, another is ability to save. Friends, you need to have both the things. You have willingness but you do not have ability, then savings cannot be possible. On the other hand, if you have ability but you do not have willingness to save, in that case also real savings cannot take place. So both the things must come together, willingness and ability. Next is mobilization of savings. Now whatever savings has taken place, some person has saved 500 rupees, another has saved 1000, another has saved 2000. So one person has saved 1 lakh. Now whatever saving is done, if this amount are kept with themselves, they are useless. These amounts must be transferred to the banks and other financial institutions in manner of savings or deposit created into the banks and financial institutions. So whatever is saving made by the individuals, they will deposit them into the banks and financial institutions, so that savings made by the individuals are transferred from the individuals to the banks. So this transfer procedure is known as mobilization of savings. Now all the savings made by the individuals are collected with the bank or financial institutions. When the bank and financial institutions are holding them, and they keep on holding with themselves only, then also that is useless. They have to make investment, means the amount which is received from the individuals, bank and financial institutions will give them as a loan for productive avenues, loan for productive purposes. Now when these are given as a loan for productive purposes, they will be considered as investment, and this whole process is known as process of capital formation. So the savings made here are converted into capital here. So this is the process of capital formation. Now the next factor of production is entrepreneur. Entrepreneur and entrepreneurship. Friends, you need to remember two words. Entrepreneur is a person, whereas entrepreneurship is the skill within that person. The person who is having ability and skill to start and run a business, that person is known as entrepreneur. But the skill to start and run a business is known as entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship is the skill, whereas entrepreneur is the person. He is that man of production who takes the decision and bears the risk. Entrepreneur will make all the business decisions, and he is going to bear the risk involved in the business. Now these all are other names of entrepreneur. Entrepreneur is also known as organizer, manager or risk taker. Do remember the names of entrepreneur. Next, functions of entrepreneur. Now what kind of functions will be performed by an entrepreneur? Let us learn. The first function performed by an entrepreneur is initiating a business enterprise. To initiate means to start. The person who starts a business enterprise will only be considered as an entrepreneur. The person who does not take risk to start a business will never be considered as an entrepreneur. So entrepreneur's first function is to initiate the business enterprise. Here an MCQ can be asked. Question can be like this: which is the primary function of an entrepreneur? Now the primary function of an entrepreneur is initiating a business enterprise. Second function is the resource coordination. Now in order to run a business, entrepreneur requires several kind of resources. He requires land, he requires raw material, he requires machinery. So it is the duty of an entrepreneur to coordinate all these resources. It means that right resource must be available at the right time and right place. This is the job of an entrepreneur. He has to make coordination among all the resources. And next is resource control. Now the resources which are to be utilized must be controlled. It means that resources must not be wasted. Resources must be utilized in a proper amount only. If wastage happens, that is going to create loss to the business. So it is the duty of an entrepreneur to control the resources. And next is risk bearing and uncertainty bearing. Friends, business is full of risk and uncertainty. An entrepreneur must be ready to bear this risk and uncertainty. Here two kind of risks are there: financial risk and technological risk. Entrepreneur has to bear both of them. Now risk can again be divided into two parts. It can be insurable risk and it can be non-insurable risk. Insurable risk means the risk which can be covered by insurance policy, like loss by fire or theft. The insurance company will give you insurance policy for such kind of losses. So these are called insurable risk. But the risk for which insurance company does not give you the insurance cover, they are considered as non-insurable risk, and these non-insurable risks are uncertainties. Say for example, loss due to change in fashion. Loss due to change in fashion. Now this cannot be covered under insurance. So that is known as uncertainty. Loss due to change in technology. Now this is also not coverable. That is why it is also known as uncertainty. So the entrepreneur has to bear risk as well as uncertainty. And another function of an entrepreneur is innovation. Only that businesses will be successful which create continuous innovation. The businesses that are not innovative, they will be out of the market. The categories of innovation are given by Schumpeter. Now do remember the name of this professor. Professor Schumpeter has categorized innovation into various categories. Whether a person or an entrepreneur brings new production, new methods, new processes, new market, new sources of raw material, all these things will be considered as an innovation. Now here once again a question can be asked. A question can be like this: which is the most important function of an entrepreneur? So the most important function of an entrepreneur is innovation. Which is the primary function of an entrepreneur? Then the answer will be initiating a business enterprise. Which is the most important function of an entrepreneur? Then the answer will be innovation. So these all are the different factors of production which are utilized in order to make any production. So we have learnt all the factors of production in this part. Thank you.